sitting up in the federal programs thing learning about.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. This clock is not accurate.
Okay. I will
And
tell
I
you
know
if
I
you
will,
like.
well, I won't be watching, but would you give me like a 5-minute warning at about a quarter till or maybe even 20 till and just,
Okay.
at 20
can do
till,
that.
just give me so I know to start wrapping it up.
Okay.
Because people want to get to lunch.
Right, 11:30.
Yes.
Okay, right?
No.
This ends at
No.
11:50.
This ends at 11:50.
You want me
Well,
to
give me at
do
11:40. Give me a signal. Yeah.
I could do it.
If I can get them out of there at 11:45, that'd be all the better.
Yes.
It just depends on how many questions get asked. Thank you, Lacey. There is also streaming overflow across the hall where they're going to do that, so. I can understand that. You're fine. I don't get bothered by much. Where are you from? I'm sorry? Mustang. Okay. How fun. What do you teach there? Okay, so you get to do all of it. The jack of all trades. There's not really a lot new, no. It's a good refresher. Good refresher, yeah. We all need those.
Everybody comes to me about this.
Anytime when you talk about who's used the approved
Okay, we'll see if we have time.
input on it.
Sure. We'll see if we have time. I'm also planning on doing a webinar on those at the end of July. That's okay. We will put a recording of it on the website.
The overflow room, I wrote it right there.
Okay.
In 201.
In 201. All right. Thank you.
Will you send that out then about the webinar?
Yes. Yeah. Because that I know is a stressor for a lot of people. We'll get through it. Star's still on there. No, it's their what they call Star Early Learning Assessment is their umbrella that includes both Star Early Literacy and Star Reading. So it's okay. Yeah, we had to use the name that they submitted by, but so they were looking at their overall system, and it's got a lot of people confused because they use the same verbiage. Yeah, so it's all good. Hey. How are we doing on time? We also have an overflow room where they're going to be streaming this in 201 just across the hall. If you don't want to have to stand, you're welcome to head on over there. But I can't start. Yeah. Hey, how are you, friend?
Good, how are you?
Good.
You want the overflow room, I guess? Anything new? I told her no.
I'm live on a mic, by the way.
I'm just going. No, she'll just try hold on.
It's okay. It'll be all right.
Yeah, so it's good. I'm glad the list
Yeah.
got done in time for school start.
Me too. Me too.
I'll be
It'll be okay.
So I hear you're so popular. We have an overflow room next door.
We do have 201.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll head that way. That's
How are you
also
doing?
called party room.
I'm hanging in there. How are you? So it's been a crazy ride, but it's been
I'm
good.
sure your summer has been very interesting.
How's the new baby?
He's great. In fact, this is my first official day back. So my husband, to pull the Band-Aid off slowly, stayed home with him because I'm only doing half the day.
Yes.
Okay, so he's good. He's hanging out with Daddy right now.
What a sweetie. So jealous.
I'm gonna go sit in the overflow.
Okay, here. We'll have your sweaty faces. Come back at 1 o'clock. We also have this streaming in room 201. Just across the hall.
Was in here. She got in here.
Hi.
My phone here? Oh.
I'll tell you, there's
But you're
also,
full, right?
there's
We
a
have
couple of,
seats for us.
come here.
Oh, okay.
No, come here.
Word?
Why break up a team?
Thanks.
Oh, that's enough, yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
Briefly, just that what they are. We're going to talk more about actual RSA as a whole, but we are going to do a webinar at the last week of July discussing the new assessments as well, and I'll give that information as well.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it again to find out
Okay.
because I was gonna start
Yeah.
researching.
Yeah. I'll have to have that list up here for you. Yeah, we'll do that. I just don't want to turn this into a discussion on that when we actually have other goals to accomplish. Hi. We actually have this streaming into room 201 as well, if you want to make sure you have a place to sit down.
201.
How full is our 201 room?
203.
203?
Yeah, I got it in two.
Oh, are they
You're
both
so
full?
famous.
Are they both full?
Not full yet, but you're full.
Let's figure out how many we have, because I kind of want to make
Okay.
sure they are aware
Yeah.
of that.
I'll
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 24. This is also streaming?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just looking for my
Oh, no,
reading
you're
director. I was
fine, you're
trying to
fine.
see if she's in here, if she showed up. I was like, she's here. I don't have to stay.
Well, of course you want to listen to me, though.
Not too.
You're rearranging the furniture. Are you okay? All right. No, you are fine. You're fine. Okay, good morning. It is 11 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about today. We also have this streaming into 2 other rooms, so I'm going to try to speak very loudly so that you guys know what's going on. I am Melissa Algrim. I'm the Director of Reading Sufficiency. In about 2 weeks, I'll have been at the department for 1 year. Before that, I spent 6 years in Putnam City as the elementary ELA coordinator and also doing RSA there. And for 17 years before that, I was either teaching 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, a 2-3 split, a 4-5 split, or I was an instructional coach. So been around a little bit. But we're going to talk today about reading sufficiency. I've had quite a few people say, are we going to talk about the new screeners? Yes, we will. I don't want to turn this into a long discussion on each of those screeners. We have other things to accomplish. So do be aware we are going to do a webinar on, I believe it's July 26th. I will shoot that date out as well on just discussing the screeners, the study we did, how the criteria that we looked at, so we can start investigating that. Okay? But this is RSA 101. If you're in the wrong place, this is your chance to sneak out. And just so you know, there is my contact information should you ever need to get a hold of me, my email and my phone. Also be aware that we do have some Facebook pages, if you are on Facebook, that are helpful to know about. ELA OK and ELA OK Elementary. These are actually teacher-led pages. These are not run by the State Department. These are run by teachers across the state of Oklahoma. But it's really helpful to be able to hop on there and say, hey, I'm new to 4th grade. I need some ideas for good read-alouds. Or I've been really struggling with this particular objective. How would you handle this? And then we do try to hop on there frequently to answer any questions that we possibly can, just to clear up and keep information going. The OK Early Ed just started this year. It's a pre-K and kinder page, really to focus in on that early childhood. Okay? So for our goals for this session is really just to talk about the requirements of kinder to third grade. I will preface this by saying there have not been any huge, massive new changes this year, which is a great thing. It's nice to be able to let things settle down and figure out what we need to do, because this has changed so much. We're going to talk about the 4 pathways to promotion under RSA, and then understand the documentation and ongoing requirements required by the law. So a lot of times when we talk about RSA, we use it in terms of the third grade retention law. And one of the things to really be aware of is that the purpose of RSA is to make sure that our kids have the reading skills that they need. That starts in kinder through 2. This is a K-2 law. It just ends in third grade. The law is really about identifying and intervening on students early so that we can catch them before they start failing. Because a lot of research shows that if we have students that leave third grade without those basic reading skills, that they have a higher chance of dropping out, they have a higher chance of becoming a drug abuser, of being imprisoned, living in poverty, and dying an early death. This has huge implications on our kids' lives, and it does start in K. So I hear a lot, this is too late. You're right, it is too late. If the first time we start dealing with this is in third grade, we've not done our jobs. This is a K-2 law, and this is where we really need to focus that. So anytime we talk about data, we have faces behind those numbers. And so I need to talk to you about a couple of faces that are important to me, and we don't know how this law can help or hurt kids. This is Rebecca. She just finished 4th grade. She loves horses. She loves working with her hands, being outside. Not a student at heart. She is one that we have to really work with. Now, she's a kid you love to have in her class because she's bubbly and friendly and loves to talk and is on there. She'll do anything you ask her to, but she struggles with it. But she also, we had to fight to get interventions for her, because she was one of those good, likable kids. Oh, she'll be fine. She just needs time to grow up. She really didn't need time to grow up. She had some serious gaps in her learning. And so we really had to address that. She's one that met criteria by 1 point. So she's there, but she's barely there. Okay? Olivia is getting ready to go into 3rd grade. And she is that kiddo that you just love to have, academically on top of things, above where she needs to be. But you say the word test to her, and we either have tears or tummy aches. Anybody have kids like that they know about? And so I have begged and pleaded, please do not tell this child that if she does not pass her test, she cannot go to 4th grade, because she will shut down. And a lot of times that's what our kids hear. Even if we think that that's not what we say, it's what they hear. And so what we have to do is let them know, I need you to learn how to read, because when you want to be a vet one of these days, you're going to have to take notes about the horses that you're working with. Or I need you to be able to do this because this is how this is going to affect you. They could care less about that test score. Okay? So let's talk about, we do have an RSA page that does have some resources there that we will refer to throughout this session. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to hop on there. We are trying to update that and make some changes to it. It's got some outdated information that we're trying to get pushed through. So just do be aware that that's constantly changing, but that's a place to go to for that information. So for kindergarten through 3rd grade, so let's talk about what the main part of RSA really does need to be. Whenever we start something, we need to have a plan. And the reading plan lets us outline what our instructional day should look like. And so every district is required under statute to have a reading plan, and it has input from all of those stakeholders, and it's updated annually. So when we update that plan, we're making sure that everything is still up to date, that we're still doing all those things. And we do have a few districts, sorry, I'm having to fix this microphone. We do have a few districts that do not have to update their plan because of they have all of their students that have met criteria, those types of things, but very, very few, less than 2 dozen across the state. How many of you are familiar with multi-tiered systems of support, or RTI? Okay, so if you are, you've seen this triangle before. RSA is really ensuring that MTSS model is being used in the K through 2 grades. And so we start with Tier 1. So when we make our plan, we are looking at a research-based program for Tier 1. This has to be an uninterrupted 90 minutes of instruction for all students, not just our good ones, not just our high ones, but all students have to have access to on-grade level instruction for that 90 minutes. It does have to be a research-based program. That's required in statute. So OERs, if you're using open education resources, those can be used to supplement, but cannot be the core. Now I get questions a lot of, well, what can I do in that 90 minutes? So reading instruction includes instruction on reading, phonics, phonemic awareness, those types of things, as well as spelling, writing. Those are things that are directly related to reading. I get asked a lot, can we teach science and social studies that time? Yes, with a caveat. We can read about science and social studies. We have to read about something. Why not what we're studying in our content areas? But that might not be the only time I'm addressing science and social studies, because they need time to actually get their hands dirty to really address what the standards in those content areas are asking for. So things you might think about, if I'm a first grade teacher and I'm doing a unit on plants, I might read about plants, learn the vocabulary of plants. I could read Gail Gibbons' book, Plant to Seed, and I could read Eric Carle's The Tiny Seed. I can compare genres. I can look at text features. All of those things that we need to learn as readers. And then I go to my science time, and then I can start measuring plants and doing all those things and actually growing them. And I can even come back the next day and write about my observations in plants. So I can go back and forth with that. So the things that I would be doing for those content areas that involve reading and writing, I can do during that 90-minute block. But if it's involving other things, I need to do it outside. And those are really, really important as well. Okay? Some kids are not going to have all of their needs met during Tier 1, which means we need to provide intervention time. So we have Tier 2 and we have Tier 3. Tier 2 interventions are usually reserved for students that are within about 6 months of their peers. So think about a third grader who might be struggling with long vowel sounds or vowel variants, not the third grader that's struggling with CAT spells cat. Okay? So for these students, interventions need to be provided in addition to, not instead of, Tier 1. We always want to supplement what we're doing, not replace it. They need to be based on the specific student needs. At one point, it was specified that Tier 2 interventions needed to be 30 minutes long. That's no longer the case. It says, as the student needs. So for a kindergartner that's working on letter names, letter sounds, 5 or 10 minutes a day of intense practice on letter names, letter sounds is going to be much more effective than 2 days of a 30-minute session. A third grader that's working on comprehension interventions might need that 30 minutes. So it depends upon the needs of that student and sometimes of where they are. For Tier 3, these are students that are more than 6 months behind their peers. These are our kiddos in crisis at this point. We need to do something serious with them. Tier 3 does not necessarily mean special education. It can, but it does not require it. Sometimes it's lack of instruction. Think about that kiddo that's gone every day or every Monday, or somebody who shows up at 11 o'clock every morning for school and they've missed half of their time. If they're missing major chunks of their instruction, they're obviously going to have big gaps in their learning, but they may not have a learning disability. Okay? So that's just something to be aware of. Now, we are required to provide at least 45 to 60 minutes of additional daily instruction for our Tier 3 students. That could include a variety of interventionists, including the classroom teacher, the teacher across the hall, a reading specialist, or a title teacher if you have one on staff. It could also include your special ed teacher. If I have 2 students with an IEP on my caseload that are working on this skill and another student also needs this skill, we could pull them in with us. It could include your EL teacher for EL instruction. That language and vocabulary that they're working on in EL is going to directly affect their reading abilities. Could be a speech language pathologist if they're working on language skills. Could also be that interventionist. Articulation, not as much. But the language is definitely a huge issue with interventions. So it also doesn't have to be that person doing all 45 minutes. So as a classroom teacher, I might pull that student in for 15 minutes to do some intervention, and then they might go to an interventionist for another 30-minute lesson with another small group. Okay, that's up to 45 minutes. So then we do have screeners, and we are required in statute for every kindergarten, first, second, and third grade students to be assessed at the beginning and end of each year with a screener. It's important to remember this purpose of a screener is to do one thing. It's to take a large group of students and quickly assess them into two groups, at risk, not at risk. And then our at-risk students, we can investigate a little bit further. Statute requires beginning and end of each year, and that's what we collect data on as far as the state goes. Best practice in this field would be 3 to 4 times a year that we screen students. Okay, we definitely want to try to get a mid-year in there. Currently, we have 15 screeners approved by the State Board of Education. Those are going to continue to be in use and approved for the next school year. Okay. Starting in the 2019-20 school year, the State Board met on June 28th of this year after looking at a review process and approved 6 screeners for use beginning after this next academic year. So this year will be a transition year so that we have time to research and get some things there and have time to train our staff. And then we'll have time to go in there. Yes, I sure can. So that's what is currently there. We have on the department website, on the RSA page, a spreadsheet that describes all 15 of these, as well as what their proficiency level is for each of those. We will be developing similar and probably more useful helps for these, but we just haven't had a chance to get that done yet because we've been on the road all week. So these were the only 6 used as screeners. Now, I've had questions, but we really like one of these others that weren't on here that we use also. Can you use it in addition? Yes. But one of these has to be your RSA screener. For identification purposes, yes.
Beginning and ending testing would be one of these.
Yes, beginning and ending testing. Does that help? Okay. Okay, so when we use a screener and we identify students who are at risk, we have to provide a program of reading instruction for those students just to help them out and get them to where they need to be. So the program of reading instruction must align with the Oklahoma academic standards. It can include, but not limited to, sufficient instructional time, either in school or outside of school, such as Saturday school or summer school or even after school tutoring. Assessments that we might want to use are diagnostic assessments or monitoring. I'll talk a little bit more about what those different assessments are like in my 1 o'clock session in case you want to come back. So we do have sample APPs on the OSDE website. You can see that this one is for 1st and 2nd grade. This one is for 3rd. There's slightly different requirements in statute for each of those grades, which is why there's 2 separate forms. When students are at risk for reading in kindergarten, we're required to really focus in on teaching reading skills for Oklahoma standards. We know that we have kindergartners that come in that have never held a pencil, never held a crayon, and don't know what any of those marks on that page could possibly mean. And so we really have to just have time to teach them those standards. And what happens is we have a lot of times with those kindergartners, we see a lot of them start taking off and going up like this, but we have a few that are still down here. And so these become our big intervention kids. These just really needed instruction that they didn't have to begin with. So we don't want to just wait for them to magically mature. There's not a magical maturation button. My husband's 53. He hadn't hit it yet. It's not going to happen. So kids don't really just magically mature. But they do have times where they are just needing more opportunities for instruction. And so we get that. But that's why we have to monitor them frequently. We also don't wait until January, if that's the case, to see are they where they need to be or not. I might wait and give them another assessment in 3 or 4 weeks, or I'm starting to really kid watch in those cases and keeping checklists. Not everything has to be a formal assessment as far as monitoring their progress. So keeping a checklist of I need them to be able to do this. Can they know, do they know most of their letters? I'm not so much worried about which letters they know or don't know, but they know most of them. Can they get there? Okay. Then I can formally assess them later on. Okay. For first and second grade, if we're still struggling, we need to be a little more intentional about the skills and really focusing in on those skills that a student might be needing. And this is where we start introducing a student reading proficiency team, just to develop the plan. So this SRPT team would be the current teacher. So if I'm a first grade teacher, it would be me. It would be a second grade teacher or the teacher above. So if Lacey's my second grade teacher, I can go to her and say, hey, would you just check out what I wrote? Is it getting to where we need to be? And then the parent, we need to pull them in because the first time that they hear there's a problem better not be in 3rd grade. We need to hear it now. And that's why we need to make sure that we're having them in and we're having those discussions. Now, sometimes parents still don't hear it, but we are able to at least document that we have made those conversations. If your district has a certified reading specialist available, please include their expertise. If they do not have one available, you cannot grow them somewhere. It's okay. So it's only if available. 3rd grade. Same thing as first and second, but we need to really be a lot more targeted, and we may be needing to pull in some specialized tutoring. If we're at 3rd grade and we're still on a program of reading instruction, there is an alert there because we're hitting a deadline. Same SRPT process for developing a plan. If you are lucky enough to be pulling in reports for your district for RSA, there are 4 of them that we turn in throughout the year. There's the reading plan that we've talked about. It is currently open. This is where we're outlining what we're going to do, and it's due August 31st. We will read all 900 and some odd of those plans as they come in, and we will either approve them or give you a call and say, we've got a problem, let's talk. Okay? Then we also do the beginning of year report. This is basically just saying, this is how many kids we tested, and this is how many we have at risk in each of those grades. We cannot disperse any funding until every single school in the state of Oklahoma has completed both of these reports. Funding is attached to those. So there are times where I'm going to call and say, please do your report. Please do your report. Then I'm going to drop the please. But if it seems like our funding's taking a while, just realize we are trying to get all of those schools in and make sure they all get them taken care of. We also do a 3rd grade promotion retention report that just basically says for any student that did not meet criteria, what did we do with them? And then our end of year report just lets us start seeing some large number growth. How did we do from here to here? So if we can start looking at systems-wide information. There is funding attached to RSA. It's usually a one-time disbursement. We usually send that out in December. Again, we have to just make sure all those reports are done. What happens is the legislature says we've got this much money divided among all the kids that need help. So we take all those students that were at risk and we divide that number into that amount that was given to us, and it becomes a per pupil disbursement. So last year it was about $85 and some odd cents per student. So however many students you turned it at risk, that's how much you received as that disbursement. There is on the department website a list of things that we can spend money on, things that help students learn how to read, focused on K through 3 is the short version. Books for your classroom, intervention materials, PD for your teachers on how to teach reading are all fine. A rug for your students to sit on? No. Please find another funding source. Paying the light bill. Yes, light is important. We do need light to be able to read our books, but that's not an appropriate use for RSA funding. Okay? If you ever have a question on how that money should or could be sent, please give me a call. Any questions so far on this? This is nothing new, but it's good to kind of go over some of those things. Yes?
Do you ever collect data on the 4th and 5th graders and continue it on?
It was passed into statute for us to start tracking students past 3rd grade, and so we were working on building that report now, hopefully to throw out this next year, but we do not yet have it completed. Okay. No. Correct. 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 All right. So pathways to promotion. So like I said, this is not a 3rd grade retention law. This is a K-2 law, really, but there are a lot of details dealing with the retention promotion that we do need to pay attention to. And that's kind of why it takes our focus a lot of times. Not to mention it's also a highly emotional issue. So there are 4 pathways to promotion. I could meet criteria on the 3rd grade state reading test. We can show proficiency on one of the state-approved screeners. We can meet one of 7 good cause exemptions, or there can be a unanimous decision to promote through the SRPT. What statute says is that students who do not meet criteria are not subject to good cause and do not qualify for probationary promotion shall be retained and provided intensive instructional services and supports. In other words, we can't just say you're in 3rd grade again, good luck. They need intervention. They have failed for a reason. Actually, we have failed them in some way, and we need to close those gaps. Okay? So there must be something that is going on. That student, because a lot of times we'll see 3rd graders who, in their retained year, they benchmark above where they need to be. A lot of times, because that's already where they are, and they're above their age peers. But they start dropping off pretty quickly. So we don't wait till they drop off to start getting them an intervention. If they've been retained, no matter where they score on that beginning of year, plan on having them on an APP with a plan and intervention. So some key things to think about. The pathways were designed to allow for the best decision for each individual student. I don't care how well we think on all of these, there's always going to be that one child that comes in and says, but what about? And we have to go think about that one. So we have ways to address all of those situations. Promotion decisions should never be based off of one score. The state test score is a place to start the conversation, not end it. Okay? So for our RSA criteria, that first pathway, all 3rd graders receive 2 scores. The RSA criteria, which is either a meets or does not meet, and then the overall performance, which is below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced. The 2 do not match, and they don't match for 2 very good reasons. One is the criterion is looking at standard 2 and standard 4, about 70% of the blueprint. It's taken out research, it's taken out grammar, it's taken out critical analysis of text, and it's looking at things like main idea, details, genre, and vocabulary. Okay? The basic skills. The overall performance considers all of the questions on the assessment. So there's 2 different data sets. The other thing to consider is that on the overall performance for proficient, it's basically saying that student is college and career ready. When we talk about their meeting RSA criteria, they've met some foundational skills. That's 2 different goals. Okay? So we have 2 different data sets and 2 different goals. So it is possible that I could have a student that scores below basic here, but has done well enough here that they have met the goal for RSA criteria. It's also possible I could have a student that's basic here, but did not do well enough here to meet that goal and did not meet criteria. That's usually the only overlap. Okay? I know that can get confusing, but that is where we are looking at that. The RSA portion is the only score we would use to have that discussion on probation or retention, or promotion or retention. Okay? We don't worry about the overall performance. Now, I have had people say, well, I had a student that met RSA criteria, but we really think he needs to be retained. That's fine, but it's under district policy, not under state law. Okay, so you would follow what your district procedures are for that. I can answer a lot of questions about RSA, but if you want to ask questions about the assessment itself, Christy McCreary is an amazing specialist for this, and she has a great gift for explaining things that even I can understand it that way. And she deals a lot with that specialist. So this is her contact information. If you have any questions about the OSTP, please feel free to give her a shout. So looking at pathway 2, the screener. So in statute, scoring at the end of 3rd grade proficiency on any of the adopted screeners is a way to be exempt from mandatory retention under statute. Each publisher has identified the proficiency level. That's not something we did at the department. It's the publisher has based off of their data that they had that says this is end of 3rd grade. And like I said, on the department website, there is a spreadsheet that gives that level for each screener. So any 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grader who shows that end of year proficiency is exempt from retention. This does not mean that they had to take it during the beginning or end of year assessment window. I might have had a 3rd grader that showed up on my door in October, and I decided to go ahead and give them the screener, and they benchmarked well above. We use that score and move on. A lot of times just keeping a running list of kids who are above that benchmark of whatever you're using. If you're using multiple screeners, I do know I have a lot of districts that use like maybe Dibbles and STAR is the one that they have on their reading plan. If you're also using Dibbles and they meet it on Dibbles, that's fine too. It can be any of those 15 screeners. It doesn't have to be your one official screener, as long as it's one that's approved by the state board. Okay? Any questions on that one? Because I know that can get confusing. Okay. So we have also 7 good cause exemptions. Now on your Attendee Hub app under this session, there's this PowerPoint on there as well, but there's also 3 one-page PDFs. And one of those is listing each of these good cause exemptions in great detail. That's just in a one-page document, so that you can print that out if you need to give that to your teachers or slip that into your binder as a reminder of what these are. And I'm just going to quickly go over these. These really haven't changed in a couple of years. The first good cause is for limited English proficient students. They've had less than 2 years of English Learner Program instruction. And then students who participate in the Oklahoma Alternate Assessment Program, or the OAP. These are students with severe disabilities, and it's been written into their IEP that this is the most appropriate assessment for them. Good cause 3 is for those who demonstrate an acceptable level of performance on an alternative standardized reading assessment. Right now there are 4 that are approved by the state board. There's the ITBS, 2 different forms of that, the SAT-10, and the Terra Nova. And on the department website, there is a PDF that says exactly which battery they are supposed to take, and they need to be at the 45th percentile on that. They don't take the huge big test. They take one subsection of it, okay? 45th percentile, if you look on that with grade equivalencies, is usually about 3rd grade, 3rd or 4th month, just so you have an idea of where they are. So then also students who demonstrate through a teacher-developed portfolio that they can read on grade level. And then students who have an IEP and were previously retained for a year. Good cause 6 is for those students who have been retained for a total of 2 years. For both number 5 and 6, if they were retained in pre-K, that counts. And then the last one is for students approved by the Office of Assessment with exceptional emergency circumstances. Now, for example, we had a student who was in a horrific car accident with his family, lost one parent, the other parent was in ICU. That was in a case of an extreme medical emergency. Your district testing coordinator has the form that needs to be filled out to apply for that type of exemption. Okay? Because I've had some saying, well, can I do that because they're homeless? That's not the extreme. We don't like that, but it's not what we're discussing at that point. Question?
On the retention, a TK year would count as a retention year, right? If we have
For transition years also do count as a retention year. Thank you, yes. Any other questions? Okay, you guys are a quiet bunch this morning. So student reading proficiency team. All of the other pathways have specific numbers and benchmarks attached to them. This one does not. This requirement says that of the student reading proficiency team, if a unanimous decision is made to promote, then you may promote. And the student reading proficiency team consists of the 3rd grade teacher, responsible for reading instruction, a 4th grade teacher who teaches reading, and the parent or guardian, a reading specialist if available. That parent or guardian is a really important part. We don't want to have this meeting and then have the principal just call up the parent and say, by the way, this is what we decided. The parent needs to come in and be a part of the conversation. Now, how this works, though, is that this team meets and you lay out all of the data. And we want to consider all of that data because we have tons of data on all of our kids, especially those we've been intervening on. We have our benchmarking data. We have our progress monitoring data. If they're on an IEP, we have their data towards their goals. If they're an EL student, we usually have WIDA data. We have classroom assessments. We have classroom observations. We have tons, attendance records, all that kind of stuff. We need to be able to lay that data out for parents in a parent-friendly way and saying, this is why we think your child would be successful in 4th grade with continued interventions, or this is why we feel that your child would be successful having another year of 3rd grade. Okay? The decision to promote must be unanimous. So all members of the team must agree if promotion is the right thing. If it does not have to be unanimous to retain. So if the school members are saying, we really feel that retention is the best option and the parent does not agree, we still are retaining. So the next question is, what's the appeals process? There is not one. It was not written into statute. That's the way it works. This is the only time that happens that way usually. Okay? What if they move schools? I'm going to get to that one in just a second. Good question. It's a frequently asked question, actually. So that decision is then approved by the principal and the district superintendent. Okay? If we're retaining, it doesn't have to be approved by the principal and superintendent, although I sure would want my school administrator in on that conversation. Okay? Okay, any questions on those pathways? Okay, I am going to come back to that question in just a second. Yes, Amber? Okay.
So your exemption pathway,
Uh-huh.
is that, in the answer to this, is that required to be approved by the superintendent as well?
Exemptions need to be approved by the superintendent. So if we come over here to documentation, there's another one-page document on your app that says for each of these different pathways, what required documentation needs to be there, okay? And so anything that we're promoting beyond Pathway 1, we need to have an administrator's signature on that as well. So for the documentation needed, the short version is that any student who does not meet RSA criteria needs to have some kind of documentation in their record stating what happened. Did we go to a different pathway or were we retained? It's also recommended that we keep track of those APPs, because a lot of the exemptions do require 2 years of intensive intervention. The APP is documentation of that. It also is really helpful when you have a parent that comes back in 3rd grade and says, this is the first time I've heard there's an issue, and you have an APP from kindergarten, you have an APP from 1st grade, you have an APP from 2nd grade saying, we have been saying there is an issue. The third thing to consider is we have a very mobile society. And having those APPs follow that student around is really helpful for a receiving school to not have to start from scratch. To be able to say, oh look, they were getting intervention. Here's what the other school was doing and how it worked. We may not be able to do the exact same thing if we don't have that program, but at least we know what was happening. And we don't have to start all over again. Again, let's see, we've got a little bit of time. We're not going quite as long as we were, so let me pull that up. Oh, academic progress plan. And it looks like it's going to be slow and difficult, so never mind, I'm not going to pull it up. On that one-page documentation that I have, that PDF file, I've gone over each pathway and just said, this is what needs to be in the file. and tried to spell that out very clearly. Again, something you can print out, you can give to your administrator, keep in your folder, or give to your teacher saying, hey, make sure we do this. Okay? Okay, so we do have some ongoing requirements. So after 3rd grade, for students who have been retained, they must be provided with a high-performing teacher. Now that can be a little difficult in some of our smaller districts. If I have 2 3rd grade teachers and they're both first-year teachers, you do what you can with the staff that you have. But if you have a choice, you give that student to your highest performing teacher to help them out. That student also needs to have intensive instructional services and supports. I'm sorry. You do what you can sometimes. And then you do have a 90-minute uninterrupted reading block. Again, they're in 3rd grade. That's required for everybody. And any additional strategies that the district thinks is appropriate and have resources for. So some of these strategies may include these items. They don't have to include all. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the high-performing teacher.
Yes.
If in the SRPT meeting the parent requests that teacher again because of relationship, do we have to go back to the high-performing teacher, or can we?
I would do anything.
It's an emotional meeting.
If I can keep that parent on my side, I'm going to do everything I can to help that parent. It might be a good conversation to have. This is why I think this other teacher might be more beneficial.
Okay.
But I think I would keep everything you can to keep that parent engaged and going. I get it. So. Okay, in addition, students must receive at least one of the following. They need to get some kind of supplemental tutoring either before or after school or even during school. If you have interventions going, you're doing this. Okay? A parent-guided read-at-home assistant plan or a mentor or tutor with specialized reading training. In other words, don't retain a kid and not do anything with them extra. We need to be addressing their needs. So if students that are promoted through exemption or also promoted with SRPT committee, both have to have intensive reading instruction, again, more intervention, in 4th grade until they show proficiency through an through the screening instrument, not the 4th grade test. There's nothing now that requires the OSTP to be involved. Okay, now we're looking at that screening instrument for getting them off of that probation part or out of that area. Okay, thank you. So if I have a student that went forward and they went forward on Good Cause 5, they have an IEP, they've been retained 1 year, I want to make sure they're still getting their intervention. Likely that's going to be met through their IEP, but it's still worth that conversation to make sure. So a couple of frequently asked questions that I want to make sure we get to. Oh, and I'm sorry, before I forget, this is also that last 1-page PDF of exactly what's the requirements for each of those situations, just to make sure. So frequently asked questions. What if the student moves after taking the test? They've been with you for the testing window in the beginning of May. They're out of there. They go somewhere else. Let's assume an Oklahoma school. The district that administered the test is responsible for determining that promotion pathway. The intent of the student reading proficiency team was for the teachers who have worked with that child to make that decision. And so the teachers that have been with that child need to be the one making the decision. They're also that's the school that's also going to get that child's scores. So it makes sense that that's where we're going forward from. That decision needs to be included with the student's records when they go to the next district. What if they didn't take the test? If they were not enrolled in an Oklahoma public school during the testing window, then RSA does not apply. That would mean students that may moved in from out of state. You get a new student from Missouri, first day of May, then they're going to go ahead and go to 4th grade. RSA does not apply for them. If they were homeschooled, they show up on the door to enroll, RSA does, and they say, well, I'm a 4th grader, RSA does not apply. You would follow your district policies and procedures for placement. So if you have a district policy that says we give you a placement test to determine your best grade if you were not at an accredited school, then that's what you would do for all students. You don't do something special just for that child. Make sense? Okay. Yes?
What do you do with a kid who's online who was at the school the whole year and never took the test?
I think I had that question yesterday, and that's when I'm having to double check on. So could you jot that question down, either email it to me or put it on an index card in a little bit with your contact so I can get back to you? Because that seems to have happened a couple of times. Okay, so for students who were enrolled in a school but were just absent during the window, the parents decided they did not want them taking the test, they took them out the entire window. If that's the case, the student does not meet RSA. They did not meet pathway 1. There's no way to do that. They're going to have to find either another pathway or be retained, depending upon what is appropriate for that child. Okay? So let's say Johnny's in school. April 1, parent says, we're not coming to school, we're not taking that test. They show back up on May 1st. They were not present during that time. They just weren't in school. Okay? So if you have any other questions like that, again, there's my contact information for those doozies. Thank you so much. I appreciate that one. But are there any other questions that you have for me? Okay, yes, ma'am. And I'll come back to you. Sure.
So if your student meets the screener, say in January or whatever.
Okay.
What do y'all go ahead and put all that documentation with it, or you just stick the APP plan in the permit folder?
Okay, so the question is, what if the student meets the screener in January? So the first thing I would do is first I would keep a list. If they just have to meet that screener benchmark once, they don't have to be at that level during the test. Now, as far as coming off of a plan, I think that that's where your district needs to make some decision-making rules based off of your data. How many points, data points do we really need to have at that point to say they're safe? What we don't want to do is say, okay, they're just above, take them off, then they dip back down and they're back on a plan again.
No, I get that.
Okay.
Once they come off the plan,
Once they come off the plan,
do you keep all the data for that year? Like if you had a portfolio going.
Gotcha.
That, or are you gonna ditch it or
if I had a plan going, especially moving towards 3rd grade, I would go ahead and hold on to that just in case that did not meet score came back. And I'd have something to refer back to. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be part of their permanent record. I would keep track somehow in their permanent record, though, that they have been on a plan, and maybe just as a one-page document, but that's a lot of data, I understand, to keep tracking on that. But I would hold on to it through that year, especially if it's 3rd grade. Yeah. What?
Okay, so the student that does not take the 3rd grade test because they were either out of state
Yes.
or were in private, all of that. So if they're going into 4th grade, we don't have to give the alternate assessment to determine what grade they're going to go into?
You can if that is a district policy,
Okay.
but that is not a requirement under state law.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Any other questions? All right, go enjoy your lunch. Thank you guys very much. Sure.
Okay, so if the child